From the MZ Studios Dallas virtual studios in cyberspace, this is Deconstructing Dallas. Greetings, everyone. It's your co-host, Ryan Trimble, joined once again by a man who may or may not be standing in line to vote. He, of course, Shawn Williams. Shawn, good day, sir.
Good day, Ryan. I am not standing in line. I hope to be getting that done very soon. I was recently chastised via social media for not having the proper voting plan.
You better get a plan, so Shawn.
I need to. I realize that I have to create a date and time in order for it to be a plan. So, but I do know where I'm going to vote. I am going to vote at the American Airlines Center.
Well, oh, wow. Well, there'll be a mob scene because everybody will want your autograph. The co-host of Deconstructing Dallas is out to vote. Go get him.
Well, I guess I better go early then.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, speaking of American Airlines Center, been seeing some great buttons. The Dallas Mavericks, of course, had, I think it was 25,000 buttons printed up for the first, X number of voters. I think it was 20,000. Instead of getting the I voted sticker, which here we are all enjoying the Pavlov's dog of getting a sticker. Now you get a button. I mean, this is like...
Oh, that's a big reason why I wanted to go down. I may be too late now, but I wanted to get one of those buttons.
From the everything I really needed to know I learned in kindergarten school of thought, I'm going to vote to get a button. So, well, I'll be excited to see your button, sir.
If they have not run out, I am definitely planning to get down there soon. I've seen a number of our great citizens of Dallas who have been very excited to show off their buttons. And so
there are.
I want to be in that number, as they say.
Indeed.
Well, I think the first person I saw with one on their timeline was Mayor Pro Tem Adam Powell, who obviously is a huge Mavericks fan anyway. And I was like, oh, man, I've got to get in on this.
Well, I saw one of my favorite pony fans, the great Mike Haynes, who was may or may not have been my favorite bartender in college, but he is now at the Stew Pot, and he does a great job for them downtown. But he had his mask on, and he got his button, and he was fired up. Multiple picture social media posts, Shawn.
Well, there have been a number of early voters. I'm an early voter. Are you? I can't remember. Are you an election day voter?
No. I don't like voting on election day, surprisingly.
Okay, there's some other folks in our office who are election day voters.
They're pure election day voters.
I always like to get it out of the way for early voting, and we aren't the only ones who are down for early voting because the numbers are in and they are high.
Yes, I think you're in the early but not often category, right? Shawn's not into the cheating category yet.
I'm trying not to be in the often category. That's my goal.
Well, I'll tell you what, Shawn, you are not alone in wanting to go vote. Record numbers of voters across, especially in the urban counties in Texas. Dallas, of course, being a big one. We broke a record on day one. I believe, if they're not still counting, broke a record on day two of early voting.
I think I saw record on day two also.
Yeah, so people are coming out in droves. Some might say they're crawling over broken glass to vote. We shall see what the final numbers end up. We have another week of early voting. Plus, we've got COVID, so we've got all the mail-in ballots. So, not a lot of it's going to be in the breakdown of all this after the election. It'll be interesting to see because it's a massive outlier. But fun stats for you, Shawn. Are you ready?
I'm ready for stats.
Harris County on day one. More people voted in Harris County, of course, where the city of Houston is. More people voted in Harris County on day one of early vote than voted in the entire state of Georgia. Isn't that amazing? That's amazing,
That's a lot, man. That is a lot of voters, and I don't know if that means that because I know over the years early voting has gained a lot of steam locally. I'm assuming a lot of steam statewide. I don't know if Georgia is just not an early voting state, but those are amazing numbers.
Yeah, beats me, but man, Houston, you guys are doing it down there, and everybody across Dallas County doing it too. We'll see what happens. Obviously, most of our listeners, I'm sure, know that there is no more one punch voting. This is where you can go in and vote by hitting one button, Republican or Democrat, and then you can walk out. That has gone away. So you have to go down your ballot, which should create a really interesting scenario for a lot of the down ballot races as Democrats try to challenge for the state house. We'll see you're going to like this phrase, Shawn. We'll see who the stickiest voters are. The intuitiveness of which party's voters will stick with it all the way down the ballot.
Well, for people who are sticking with it to get into the voting booth, people waiting 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, I'm sure that they're going to get as much time with the ballot as they can, would be my guess. And I think that while I'm not sure if people will call it enthusiasm, it is stick-to-itiveness. It is people who are making sure to let their voices be heard, which I definitely applaud. When I was going on my morning walk past the Park in the Woods Rec Center, on the first day of early voting, I mean, the line was down the parking lot, into the parking lot, around the building. I mean, we are seeing a lot of people who are, patiently waiting for their time to vote. And so can only imagine what that might look like on election day. Hopefully people will have gotten their vote out and we'll have a smooth day on election day. But I know one thing, people are voting right now.
Yeah, it's a great thing to see. And speaking of stick-to-itiveness, we'd like to thank our listeners for sticking with us as we like to listen to ourselves talk a little bit on the front end. But we do have a great show coming up today, Shawn.
Yeah, we are very excited to visit with one of our clients of Allen Media. We're going to be talking with Adam Powell, President and CEO at Communities and Schools of the Dallas region. Adam is a really, really interesting guy who was recently profiled by our friend and most recent guest, Sharon Grigsby, in the Dallas Morning News when she talked about the work that Communities in Schools is doing around mental illness with some of our youngest students and mental health of our youngest students. And so I'm excited to have a conversation with Adam about that.
Yeah, I've had consciousness of CIS, Communities and Schools, since my early years with Chairman Branch, going to their events, seeing their stuff back now 15 years ago, Shawn. So great to see, that organization who does such great work with their now leader who's just a little bit over a year into his tenure. So excited to jump into this interview.
Well, without further ado, let's first head to a break, which I think is a do. But after that ado, we are going to come back and talk with Adam Powell from Communities and Schools. So this is Deconstructing Dallas. Shawn Williams, Ryan Trimble. We'll be right back right after this.
Welcome back, Deconstructing Dallas. Ryan Trimble, Shawn Williams. Shawn, I'm excited to be joined today by a woman that our firm gets to work with quite frequently. He, of course, Adam Powell, the president and CEO at Communities and Schools, Dallas region. Adam, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Now, we obviously, have gotten to know you, and folks at our agency have gotten to know you. But for our listeners, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and your family story.
Yeah, so I am originally from Montgomery, Alabama. Grew up in the house, coincidentally, with a police officer, given the current times that we're in. My father was a state trooper for 26 years. Started in 1977 in Haleyville, Alabama, and he was actually the first black state trooper in that county, which is Winston County, Alabama. My mother was a social worker, so I was raised in a home that really was was firmly committed to service, right? How do you serve others? And in a sense, that's how we value life, right? Like in terms of, when your epitaph, what does the dash mean, right? What did you do in the time that you were alive in service to others? So, grew up with that kind of heart. My father ended up being Governor George Wallace's chief of security in the late 90s, and was actually in his room when he passed away, holding his hand, because they had developed over the course of years a genuine friendship. Which is just kind of an interesting piece of the story. And I say that again, going back just to kind of that idea of service. So then I went off to college in Mississippi at Jackson State, and shortly after that found myself in Dallas in the nonprofit space, and have been here now for 15 years. I worked with several education nonprofits, and recently, last few years, found myself at communities and schools in the Dallas region, where I'm excited to be and incredibly excited about the mental health work that we're doing.
Well, we're also excited about the work that you all are doing, and excited that we have an opportunity to work with you and your team. So for our listeners, can you tell folks what communities and schools, Dallas region is all about? Talk about what you guys do.
Yeah, in a sense, I always say it this way. We are really about democratizing the life chances for our students. We work with primarily underserved students that don't have the same opportunities, whether they be academic or otherwise, as other students in the region. So what we do is put site coordinators, so full-time bodies on campuses that work with what I call opportunity students. Other folks would call them high risk. I refer to them as opportunity students, to really help them overcome many of the social impediments to academic success, right? And there's a ton of literature out there. Students that, generally speaking, don't perform well academically, there are generally tons of reasons that's not occurring, many of which are non-academic in nature. And what we do is really help students mitigate, or in some cases eliminate, those non-academic barriers, which include homelessness. All right, if you think of Maslow's kind of hierarchy of needs, that foundational level, for so many of our students, they don't have, whether it's housing, whether it's food, whether it's mental health support, right, and just a litany of things that our students are struggling with that are impediments to academic success, and we really help them bridge those gaps.
Now, Adam, Shawn and I had the opportunity to interview Sharon Grigsby, our friend, the Metro columnist at the Dallas Morning News. Actually, she was our most recent guest on the show, and she wrote a piece about you recently, and it was entitled "As Anxiety and Depression Grow Among Dallas Kids, Meet the Man Fighting on Their Behalf." I hope our listeners go read it. It's a really great piece about you, but I wanted to specifically ask you about the mental health piece of your job. What are you seeing in our schools and in the students you're serving as far as mental health goes?
Yeah, on the heels of COVID, one of the things that has really emerged is kind of this mental health crisis. And I probably shouldn't even frame it that way, because it was a crisis long before COVID. And I think COVID just kind of exacerbated it. Sure. But what we're seeing is students are struggling with anxiety, depression, as you alluded to, trauma. The list goes on. I mean, we even have had several students that are struggling with suicidal ideations, right? And for so many kids, one thing we know about mental health is it does not discriminate, or mental illness. It does not discriminate, right? But the response sometimes can be discriminatory, in that if you are an affluent student, maybe attending a suburban school, or maybe in a private school, there's just a litany of resources that you have access to that maybe your parents or your guardian or whomever can tap into for you. But for so many of our students that are struggling with some of these mental health challenges, they don't have that opportunity. So we, in a sense, at communities and schools, become, again, that bridge for so many of those students. And when you think about all the things between COVID, just kind of the social unrest in our country, compounded with just kind of being a teenager in these days, right, trying to fit in with your peer group. It shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone that, this crisis, this mental health crisis, if you will, is upon us. And it really is incumbent upon us as an organization, and really all of us, to do our part in helping to mitigate that for these students.
Adam, you talked about your father, Charles, and his work as the first Black state trooper out of Haley'sville, Alabama. And for those folks who do go read the article, they'll get a little bit more of a sense of